Okay, I guess we'll get started. My name is Shawn Rubin. I'm the Director of Technology Integration at the Highlander Institute in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm also the CEO of a edtech startup called Metrics, so I kind of see both sides of the fence, working with schools, helping them to implement blended learning, actually working at a school that uses Ed Elements software in their school in Providence, so if anyone's interested in learning a little bit more about what you just saw from Anthony Kim, I'd be happy to answer questions afterward. But we're here today to hear from some experts around hybrid learning, one-to-one, blended learning, all of these different terminologies. And what we're talking about is moving toward these hybrid learning models, and what are some of the positives of that, what are some of the models of that, and what are some of the impediments to that process. And we've got a pretty fantastic panel here today, so I'm going to do very little talking, and we're going to be listening to them, and I want to give you guys as much opportunity for asking questions as possible. We only have the one mic over here, so maybe we'll just stay in our seats, and you guys can just shout out the questions as you have them. So let's start off. We're going to actually start with Ray Schleck, the Director of New School Development at Match Education. And so our question to start off for Ray, what form of blended learning is the Match School going to implement in the fall of 2013, and why? And what are you guys hoping to learn from that?
Thanks, John. Well, first, hi, my name is Ray Schleck, and here from Match Education. And Match has currently planning to do blended learning models we're going to launch next fall. And the basic idea is, at Match right now, we do a lot of tutoring. So a typical kid at Match will get roughly 4 hours a day of traditional class and a couple hours a day of tutoring. And that tutoring has been a huge driver of our success, one of many, but our sort of first step is to enhance the time and implementation of that tutoring. The second piece is trying to figure out how do you use ed tech products in a smart way to help those tutors and the teachers who are overseeing and supporting those tutors to be unbelievably effective with their individual kids. And we see a huge range of skills from kids who come into Match, and we think the ability of technology to allow us to customize and differentiate for each individual kid, to give tutors and teachers sort of a bank of content that then that sort of kid expert can then implement as they see fit with the kid is something we're excited about. So that's sort of the general answer, and I can get into more details in a little bit.
All right, excellent. Let's move into Gene Tower, the Director of Technology for the Public Schools of Northborough and Southborough, and also the Chair-elect for COSIN. And Gene, why would a school move to blended learning?
I forgot to turn on my mic. There are so many opportunities for students, I think, to be able to work at their own pace, to be able to have multimodal approaches to their learning. And depending on how you define blended learning, there are lots of ways that they can fit classes that they wouldn't otherwise fit into their schedule. So we have a few different approaches to blended learning in my school district. And among all my colleagues, it sounds like it's a slightly different flavor. So there are a lot of different approaches out there. One thing we do is we have a STEM initiative where we have students taking extra courses online, and then they meet every other Saturday for a couple hours for the lab parts of that. So they get to do really innovative classes that we wouldn't be able to offer during the day. One of the other ways we do it is we have a lot of teachers using the flipped classroom. So they're putting up screencasts and online help and linking to, say, Khan Academy, and having students watch videos before they come to class so that they better use their class time where kids walk in ready to do something and they walk around and coach. And another way we use blended learning is that we have students in our middle school taking high school classes because they're a little bit advanced, and so we have an online approach to that. And they have a teacher in the classroom who can facilitate at a certain level, but the teacher at the high school is really their teacher of record, kind of. Some of the challenges have been dealing with teachers' unions around what that means for, is that the same as teaching a full-time class? How does it count as in their schedule? Just challenges around ironing those kinds of things out. And another challenge we have that maybe higher ed doesn't have to think about is equity. So is every kid being able to connect from home? We're not at 100% we're close in Northborough and Southborough, we're not at 100%. So how do we make that equitable? That's another one of our challenges.
Okay, and we also have Dan Callahan, who's the co-founder and chairman of the EdCamp Foundation and also a K-5 instructional technology specialist at Pine Glen Elementary School here in Massachusetts. And Dan, our question for you is really about teachers. And are teachers able to move in this direction on their own? Is it something that needs to happen at a district level or something that needs to happen at a school level? What are some of the easy entry points for teachers?
Speaking as one of those teachers union members that you're so afraid of.
No, I deal with that.
It's like anything else to some degree. You know, some people are gung-ho, ready to jump in. Some people are nervous. You know, I have had a teacher tell me I don't do technology. Had to help kind of get her there. Other people, they will completely jump in on their own. The easiest transition has been to what we've been talking a lot about today, this blended learning model. You just have kind of enough devices in the classroom, and basically you're really telling teachers is it's a self-grading workbook. And that's a lot of these products that we've seen, that's really what they are. They're self-grading workbooks and textbooks, not necessarily really transformative to the way that education is run. I'm personally more interested in the ways that we can use technology to enhance better pedagogy as well, moving into more experiential learning models, project-based, problem-based learning. And I think it has amazing potential for that, but I don't hear a lot of people necessarily talking about that. Things that have been helpful to move people in, again, like I said, generally giving kids a time and place to go do some like basic low-level skills activities. That's great. That's been easy for people to get into. iPads have been huge in my district in general, but also for teachers who are not necessarily as comfortable with technology. They feel a lot more comfortable with an iPad. So even a teacher who hasn't had a lot of exposure, hasn't done a lot of stuff, hand them an iPad with a bunch of apps and say, you know, take it home, try it out overnight. And they come back with that rich pedagogical knowledge that they have from teaching kindergarten from 20 years and say, okay, I want my kids to do this, this, and this, because they can now see the connection between what they want to do and what the hardware and software offers.
Could you also, before we move on to Tarunya, could you explain a little bit for those that aren't familiar with EdCamp, what EdCamp is and how that kind of fits into all of this as well?
Yeah, EdCamp is a teacher-run, personalized professional development model, basically, except not personalized in the way that a lot of you have necessarily been using it. It is participant-driven professional development. If any of you have ever attended an unconference of some kind, whether it be bar camp or some other various forms of it, food camp and lots of other different ones, anything that's got camp basically in it. And it's normally just like a one-day event, happens in places all around the world now. If anybody wants to sponsor EdCamp Boston, we're coming up in May the 4th, be with you. And yeah, it's great. Or if you want to talk bigger sponsorships for the EdCamp Foundation, I'm willing to talk about that with you too, while you're giving me the chance.
Softball questions. All right. Tarunya, as the senior product manager at Edmodo, how does Edmodo, with its huge scope and teacher base across the country, view its role within these hybrid or blended learning models?
And before I answer that question, how many of you have heard of Edmodo? Okay.
Can
so
I
don't need to do
Can I ask how many educators are actually in the room right now? Keep your hands up if you're on Edmodo. I'm curious. All right. All right.
Yeah, we've got
That's about your
some folks out there. So I think Jean touched on this, Dan touched on this, Ray touched on this. You know, there are very different models of blended learning out there, and I think what Edmodo really sees itself playing is being able to fit into each of those different types of models, whether you're in a classroom where you know your students don't have access to technology outside of the classroom and there's a lot of access problems. You can do a lighter touch model where you're working with the computer lab or with the iPad carts that you might have, and really using Edmodo as kind of the operating system for the work that you do. And really the way that we see that is that Edmodo can be accessed anytime, any place, anywhere, from any device that has Wi-Fi access. And so you, as a student or a teacher, has your entire portfolio of work that kind of can follow you around. We don't provide Edmodo directed content, but we do enable teachers to have access to third-party content with strategic partnerships, kind of similarly to Ed Elements that folks that we work with. But really, to get back to the question of how we view blended learning in the classroom, I actually was just at the Florida EdTech conference this past week and had the pleasure of talking to a lot of our educators on how they're using Edmodo, how they really see it fitting into their kind of day-to-day routines. And Jean touched on the flipped model, and that was actually one that really came out loud and clear. I create a short video or something on EduCreations, which is another kind of smart board application that I can put right on Edmodo. I assign that for homework, and along with that, a quiz that I have my students take that's 3 questions. And that instantly grades, and I know in the morning what groups that I'll be able to put my students into, whether it's a kind of remediation group where they need additional learning from me and then work on problems, whether it's an independent group, they really nailed it, they got the lesson down, or whether it's kind of an in-between mix of both. So we have everything from that to the teachers who are doing more like touch model.
And I just want to follow up real quick because I think it's interesting from our meeting yesterday with selling into the K-12 schools, the panel was talking about the need for professional development alongside software. And Edmodo is what's always been interesting to me is that there really is absolutely no professional development aside from the peer-to-peer professional development. And what do you think has been the reason that it's had its success without that PD aspect to the software?
Yeah, so I think one of the things, it is pretty intuitive to use. We are actually creating a kind of repository within our help center of professional development tools so that it's easy to roll out as a district leader to your district, but it's also easy for you to attend one of our webinars that we have once a week on kind of introducing you. But I think one of the biggest things that we've found, and Seth Reynolds, who I paid to call me out yesterday in the keynote, mentioned was that really there is with Edmodo, there's the peer-to-peer network is so strong because if I am a teacher and I really believe in a product, I'm more likely to believe my peer than believe someone coming in and trying to sell me something. And we were launched by a tweet and it kind of went from there. And we've only in the past year really started working closely with district leaders and showing them the power of what's already going on in their districts.
Which leads in nicely to my next question for Jean. Being the chair-elect at COSN, where do you see the district leaders here in Massachusetts? We had yesterday, Seth also shared a slide that showed that in their survey of district leaders from across the country, it was said 54% volunteered that they were doing blended learning in their classroom. I'm curious how you see that in comparison to what's happening with COSN and where you see the future of hybrid learning in the minds of these leaders across.
That's a great question. I think from a leadership perspective, we're looking for much more. We want a product that has the learning management system, but we also want a back end that has grading and assessment tools so that teachers see formative assessments right away. That marries easily with our student information package so that we can exchange information well. It has to fit into a module of other tools that we use and really provide an ecosystem that addresses several different issues. And it shouldn't come with a lot of professional development because if I need 100 hours of professional development to use your product, I don't want it. I want something that's Google fast and Apple simple. So I want to be able to open it up and it works and it's intuitive how it works. And when I start typing my question, I start seeing results right away so that it's as fast as Google. And that's the kind of product that I think schools will pay for and pay good money for when it's shown that it really addresses the questions at hand. And in Massachusetts, even if we say 50% or 60% are doing blended learning, when I talk to my colleagues, it might be 3 teachers at their high school are using Moodle. So it's at very different levels. We've got whole school systems that are using it, or whole secondary schools that are really doing a great job using a product and doing professional development in their building. And the professional development isn't on the software, it's how to tweak your pedagogy so that you know how to teach in a blended learning environment. It isn't intuitive to most teachers. They got into teaching because they're great at face-to-face. So the challenge is professional development around the pedagogy, but it can't be based around the tool, I think. And then how do you make it systemic? So right now we have pockets, probably in all of our school districts in Massachusetts, there are some teachers doing it well and other teachers who are frightened to death of it. So I mean, I really think we're at the beginning stage, and given the digital transformation that every other industry has gone through, it's amazing that we're not further along, but schools move more slowly.
And to follow up on that, so Ray, your school getting this great Gates grant to roll out blended learning in 2013, it's going to be a fast implementation process, and I'm sure that you're not looking at something where it's 2 or 3 high school teachers at the school. What is your plan for how that's going to happen?
Yeah, it's very interesting sort of being here, and you start to get snippets of this, but you think of this analogy of sort of cooking, and these different products are the ingredients, and there's a lot of different ingredients out there, different quality, but what we're trying to figure out how to become is essentially the test kitchen. There's 20 different ways to make chili. And so you can have all these different products that you put in, but what I think there needs to be is a place where somebody is very systematically and intentionally trying out different ways to implement these different products to figure out exactly what works best with individual kids. And so, we've done a few of these small tests just this year. Match has 2 different charter schools here in Boston, mostly low-income students, and so mixed access at home. And so we've tried out a couple things, and I was a teacher for a number of years, and just sitting down, I think I can get myself sort of 40% of the way there on how I think a product should be or can be best used with a particular group of kids. That 60% that I don't know, the only way for me to learn about that is to put it in front of a kid and very intentionally and systematically try to figure out and tweak how I'm asking that kid to interface with that product. The products themselves really are not at a place right now that they can tell you 6 different ways that they've tried specifically with different kids to use their product. And so, we did a small thing with Khan Academy, for example, and for the first week, it was pretty good, but not great. Huge questions as to what's a kid's stamina in working through different aims that they're putting on Khan. Do they like watching the videos, or should they click on the hints? How does the teacher interact with the kid on Khan? Should they first make the kid try to figure it out, or is it just more efficient to have the teacher explain something to a kid and then have them go practice on Khan? There's 50 different ways you can roll it out, and not all of them are equally good. And so we're trying to figure out a way to do that.
Excellent. Go ahead.
And it's interesting as I've seen my districts develop over the past few years. It seems like we really started off we wanted to find the one online math solution that was just going to work, and over time we've expanded. So now we're using iReady, we're using ST Math, we're using 10 Marks, we're using lots of different things because just like the keynote speaker was talking about earlier, different things work for different groups of kids, work for different age levels. There's at this stage there's no one magical algorithm that solves for every student.
I'm curious in the fact that this is a hybrid learning models piece, and we're not just talking about blended learning, we're also talking about one-to-one. I'm curious where you see the level and access to hardware in the school as an impact. Is this something that is perfectly fine if you have 5 to 6 laptops in a classroom, or is it something that you see needs to have that one-to-one aspect? Where do you, in your experiences, and same with Edmodo and the classroom experiences, where are you seeing the hardware? Is there a magic number?
prefer a device in the hands of every student. The kinds of blended learning things that we're talking about right now work pretty easily with just a few computers in the classroom. There were books over a decade ago being written about like what can you do if you have one computer in the classroom. Turns out you can actually do a fair bit. More devices equals more opportunities. When you start getting a device in the hands of every kid, then that's when you really start opening up new options as opposed to things that are more tied into a way that classrooms have generally been designed. Like for all the talk of say like here's a small group working on the computer, here's a small group working on a project, here's a small group working with teachers. Like elementary teachers have been doing that forever, just not necessarily with the computer in the classroom. So it's not necessarily radically changing the way that a good teacher is going to run their classroom at that stage. I think, however, if you start introducing a device into the hands of every student, that can radically change what it is. I'm assuming at a conference like this, everybody has a smartphone. Yeah.
And an iPad.
Yeah, and an iPad. And it's like, do you remember what it was like before you could find out the answer to anything at any time? Because I kind of don't anymore. Because I've had an iPhone since the very first iPhone, and I can find out the answer to almost any question at any time. I don't have to wait to find that out. Now, put that kind of access in the hands of a kid all the time, and you're really changing what the definition of what it means to be a teacher, what it means to be in a classroom. I think that we're really more in the early stages of really figuring out what that means.
Yeah, and I don't have too much to add on that other than we've started to see with a lot of the schools and districts that we work with a huge range of technology in the classroom, including the bring your own device kind of movement that's taking shape as well. And I think what Dan said is right. It's really, we're right at the beginning of it, and it's not about, okay, we're going to have an iPad in front of every student and you're on your iPad all the time, heads down. That's not at all how we want Edmodo to be used and how we see it being used in the classroom. It's really an enhancement tool. So when the teacher is asking a question or giving a poll, wanting to get a quick pulse of the classroom, they can do that. They can have a quiz, and that's then a heads down kind of time. And so it's really there's a lot of potential there, and there are different ways that schools are kind of getting around the fact that they don't all necessarily have tons of funding to go out and buy iPads for every student, nor do I think that necessarily is the answer to every problem either.
Well, I think one-to-one really goes hand in hand with online learning, because if you don't have the device, you don't have anytime, anywhere learning. If you've got a device, you can make it more personalized, more individualized, and it's anytime, anywhere. So the challenge for schools, I think, is to build the infrastructure and close that access gap so they have access in school to high-speed access to whatever information and systems and tools you're using, but also so that they have it from home. And that's a challenge that not every school district is going to be able to face right away. But some are doing like if you look at LA Unified or San Diego. San Diego's they've got a grant where they're working with Lightspeed, and they've got devices going home, and they've got access from home. So they've got 24-hour access, safe, SIPA compliant. So, I mean, there are challenges, but I think that one-to-one is where we're going.
I agree with
whether
that.
we like it or not.
Yeah, and I think many of the products that are coming out now are premised on one kid on one device. The prices of those devices is plummeting, so it's just a matter of time. I don't think it's going to be that long before. But I also think that there's a huge gap in the products that are out there that are good. There just are not a ton. When you actually talk to a lot of folks, certainly in our peer schools, very few successful charters are using technology in a very interesting or integrated way. And that's because the products just aren't that great right now. And so you come to places like this where people are very excited about products, and you see, great-looking demonstrations. But the folks on the ground are really saying, certainly you hear the story of the teacher who says, "I don't do technology," but I actually think that most of the problem is because the products just aren't that great yet. They're okay, but they're not there. And I think long term that they will get there. It's only a matter of time. But it's still a huge gap.
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation last year. One teacher was trying to use a piece of software. It wasn't working out very well, and she just had like this moment like, I hate technology, and all I'm going through my head is like, no, you hate really crappy user interfaces is what you hate. You actually really would like technology if it had a good user interface and made it easy for you to do what you want to accomplish.
So, just piggybacking off of that comment, how do the companies improve that in terms of what would you say is the next step for that? Is it opening up your classrooms for them to kind of come in and be able to tinker a little bit more? Is it you being able to have an easier feedback line for them in that instance? What is the next step to bridge that? Because I think that both sides are kind of looking at the other and saying, well, it's because your teachers aren't ready, and you're saying we're ready, your stuff isn't ready, and so how do we bridge that standoff?
One of the things that we have to do is build a really good partnership, I think. So with companies who are making products that we're going to use, I want a relationship, and I want someone specific I can call who I can hold responsible. I don't care if there are 1,000 people behind them, but the guy that sold me that product better be able to answer my question and come in and meet with my teachers and meet with me and solve problems so that when something they promised goes really wrong, they're there with me in the school until we get it worked out. And I think that partnership can take many faces. I think it can be small focus groups with people, sort of the vendors at the table, and a few different school districts who are using the product, some using it well, some not so well, so that they can learn from each other. It can be professional development. It can be, like you said, just good pipelines back and forth. But that partnership and those relationships are important.
And I know, like, we've had industrial designers come in and just observe, see how we're actually using it, and trying to figure things out. Anybody wants to come to my school anytime, just shoot me an email. We'll be glad to have you, unless it's during MCAS time. Then nobody's allowed in. End of March, nobody's allowed in. But you got a little bit of window before then. We're more than happy to have anybody come in. I'll talk to almost anybody about anything, as long as it's going to be an interesting conversation. We have people at all grade levels in my district that are, excited about trying to use these tools. People who will experiment with them. My administration is, very open to teachers trying out things without necessarily like this is the only one that you're allowed to use. We have the ability and latitude to experiment a bit. Unlike I know some districts where it's very tightly controlled. So I think you need to get into schools. You need to be talking to educators. You're an ed tech startup. Do you have actual educators on staff who can point you in the right direction of what teachers want? Do you have teachers on, teachers or former teachers on staff who can talk about what good pedagogy looks like? Because if not, it's going to be a tougher sell for the people who are actually in the trenches.
Tarunya, you want to talk from the other side? And I imagine that at this point you have all of those things that Dan's mentioning, but how it kind of evolved in the beginning.
Yeah, so we were actually founded by educators. So that's kind of how, by two technology specialists at a district outside of Chicago who every day were getting calls, please ban Facebook in the classroom, you need to ban Twitter in the classroom, you need to ban this, you need to ban that. But they were really recognizing the fact that these tools were really powerful. And yes, probably those tools don't really have a place, especially in younger grades. But they really recognized the power of that connection and power of the social network, but also saw the potential for going beyond just that and being a place where teachers could administer lessons and assignments and quizzes and have kind of a one place where they could go to do all of this. So. We were started with educators in mind, and that's kind of how we've kept up our support team, which is probably just teachers will come up to them at conferences and just give them hugs because that's one of our biggest things. I think 75% of them are former teachers. They understand when someone's frustrated or can't figure something out, and that's really important to us. And they're almost sometimes our internal feedback group. We go out into the community being in Silicon Valley, sometimes there's actually surprisingly resistance from teachers because there's so many people wanting to get into their classrooms. But we've built great relationships with districts across the country, so have really strong connections right back into the classroom.
We're going to jump into audience questions, but I have one more question. I want to go back to what Dan had said kind of in his intro. So a lot of the blended learning pieces are competency-based, right? They're minimum competency-based requirements that we're working to close the skills gap, or we're working to push students. But I wanted to go back to what you were saying about experiential and project-based, and I was just curious to hear where those pieces fit into blended learning in your minds, and how to bring some of those in so that we don't strictly stick to these minimum competencies as we're moving through blended learning.
In my school district, the teachers who are ready to jump on board and do more with blended learning are the ones who really are more project-based and sort of the risk takers and innovative teachers. And so my few teachers at this end of the spectrum who want to do drill and kill aren't interested in jumping into blended learning. So from my point of view, what we're doing with blended learning really is helping to facilitate a more innovative approach and more project-based. And it's really that end of the spectrum that is diving in more. Right now, we're talking about how to do things like credit recovery for students who might need that. And that's really, in a school district like Northborough, Southborough, that's not a big concern. So that's really at the tail end, sort of looking at those outside edges of how can hybrid learning help sort of special cases. We have students who, for one reason or another, can't really sit in a classroom, and so we do a lot with them around getting them into the classroom virtually. But for the most part, the people who are jumping in are the ones who are really innovative and doing amazing things with their students that are really more project-based.
I find that actually a little ironic, right? Because on one hand, the computer is actually probably best at making more efficient the kill and drill mastery and freeing up time to do those higher level things. And so in some ways you had this tension of the folks most interested are probably the ones who least need it. And
Right.
On the reverse side, we can just make that so much faster.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I think all these devices and software can make that good pedagogy easier. It's like what I'm most interested in as a technology specialist is great software and hardware that's going to help my kids create stuff, make stuff, do stuff. Our heaviest used things on the iPad, iMovie, Book Creator, Explain Everything. We're trying to actually create our own content, have the students
Exactly.
make things, show find new ways for them to demonstrate their knowledge as opposed to the traditional like drill and kill kind of thing.
Excellent. All right, so let's open it up to questions. If your question is directed to somebody in particular, just say that at the beginning, and if it's directed to the panel in general, then you can throw that out as well. Feel free to ask your questions from your seat, or if you'd rather, there's one microphone left over here. Okay, go ahead.
One angle that we haven't covered is parent involvement in the blended learning model. What is your experience with how parents react to it, and what do you need parents to do more to help you get to that model?
I'll take that because I think my parents are more ready than some of my teachers. Parents want a really active parent portal, and they want to be engaged in their kids' education. And that's, I think, across the board and in our school district. So I have a lot of teachers who are doing this and putting it online, and then some who aren't. And so it's creating a tension of why isn't everybody doing that. But I'll tell you, if you ask students are not so gung-ho about this. So I polled middle school kids. They don't want their parents anywhere near knowing what their assignments are, what their grades are. High school kids don't want them to see attendance on a daily basis. So it's kind of a work in progress to get the groups closer together.
And from the product side, parents are definitely very important to us, and we have a special type of parent account that every student on our platform has a parent code, and their parent, as a parent, you can see what your child is doing and engage with their teacher.
We have occasionally run into some resistance from parents. They're worried about their kids having too much screen time. I have had some parents tell my teachers like, no, they're not doing this online piece because they're looking at a screen for too much of the day already, and that's not what we want them to do. So most, I would say, generally are in favor of, because it can involve them more, but there are, as always, pockets of resistance.
It also can be very tempting to feel like as a school that you have reached out to parents when you provide information online to them. But we also know that there's no substitute for making the phone call and having the parent meeting. And so these can be nice supplements, but really parents want to feel like they know who the people are who are working with their kids, that their kid comes home and says, I learned a lot today, it was really hard. And the rest of it is sort of details.
This is just a general question for the whole panel. Yesterday, Seth, when he was talking, had a really interesting quote. He was talking about, I think it was someone from New Jersey, I don't remember who, but he was saying in the private sector, there's always a clear upside and then some downside. You can kind of analyze these things. And in the public sector, it tends to be more of a downside. And I wondered if you kind of, there only seems to be risk. And I wonder what your perspective is on integrated blended learning. It seems like if there was a huge upside, it would be very easy that everyone would just start doing it. Is it clear that there's a huge upside, or does it just seem like risk to everyone? Like the teachers see it as risk, the parents don't want to be getting involved?
I think there is a huge upside, but there are some real risks. I think all teachers, parents, and students worry about, for all the talk of personalized learning, I think they worry about that it depersonalizes the learning because it removes some of that human element. If you're spending a lot of time looking at a screen, then that's not time that you're talking with the other people in the room, that you're not working together with them in the actual physical space that you're sharing. And I think there's definitely a differential to be made in that personal versus that personalized education. At this stage, there's nothing. The software is not going to. It's going to know some things better about the students, but it's not going to know who the core of the kid is in a way that a teacher in the classroom does, or the way that a parent does. And there are things that do worry me about that. On the other hand, in my own personal and professional life, I've seen amazing connections that I've been able to make because of using these kinds of technologies. So it's definitely kind of a place of finding the balance. Let's face it, I've seen video of places where it's they have a learning lab or whatever, and you know what? It looks like a whole bunch of people in a call center, except they're all 5 years old. I'm sorry, I don't think that does a good service to our students, no matter how much growth they might make in reading or math in 1 year. I'm trying to teach my students how to be good citizens, not just good consumers of information. And that requires more than just staring at a computer, answering math and reading problems all day.
I think Anthony Kim said something about it's all in the implementation. A great product can make no difference if it's used wrong and it's not implemented well. So I think online learning, blended learning, implemented well, it has a huge benefit. Even if you just listen to legislators who say we need a longer school year and more time in school, and then look at case studies that show the peak time for students using online learning systems is from 4 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Well, you've just extended the school day, you've extended the learning. So there are lots of case studies that show to gains in achievement and gains in learning time. But we don't do research on kids. It's really hard to do research when this is the only time they're going to be in 9th grade. You can't just say, well, you kids are going to do this and you kids are going to get this. So it's challenging to come up with really compelling upsides, I think, that industry can do, because these are real kids who are going through school that time. But case studies show that it's really highly successful.
I don't think individual educators think about risk. They think about whether it's going to make their life easier or not. And so if the product seems like it's going to be a pain, then they're not going to use it. And they need someone to help them figure out how to use it, how to solve for the 50 million little ripple effects that happens when you change one thing in a really complicated system.
Is it not on? I don't know how to turn it on, so just shout.
Sorry. I'm so glad I stood at the mic. My question is about the curriculum decision-making process, which, traditionally curriculum adoption has been a deeply centralized process. Some are state adoption process, not Massachusetts. But like platforms like Edmodo sort of assume a highly decentralized decision-making process and personalized decision-making around curriculum. And I wonder if you wanted to sort of prognosticate a little bit about that, where you see that going in the future.
Sure. So I think there are two things. One, we don't necessarily feel that all curriculum decisions are decentralized. What we hope to do is help districts empower their teachers to make the best curriculum, and not even curriculum necessarily, but choices with the types of materials they use in the classroom. Dan alluded to this. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Like, not everyone needs this math tutorial. We obviously are in a world of Common Core standards, and that's kind of something that's looming over the head of a lot of teachers. And so it's really how do we help our students reach the goals that we've set out for them? And that's really where Edmodo wants to come in and help teachers figure out what works best for what students and in what setting. And I think that's definitely the trend that we've been seeing in terms of both the ed tech startups that are kind of coming out of the Valley and now Boston, excitingly, but also with a lot of the districts that we're working with who are realizing that buying these $5 million contracts with big kind of legacy systems no longer really works when you're really trying to get the results that you need to fit the new standards.
And I would say too, Edmodo is a platform. It's not a curriculum.
Exactly.
Edmodo is one of the ways that a teacher could choose to implement the curriculum. There are many different ways that any knowledgeable, competent teacher could choose from in order to design what they're going to do in their classroom in order to meet the district or school's requirements of what that curriculum is.
I think of it as sort of loose, tight management. So we're tight around the things kids have to learn, so the curriculum. That might have meant that when we were aligning to state frameworks, some third grade teacher lost her butterfly unit, but she probably is over it by now. But then it's loose in how they implement it. Because as everyone has alluded to, a kid isn't a widget. Your mileage is going to vary with every kid, so you've got to figure out what works for them. So it's the pedagogy, the explaining it in 3 different ways, the making it accessible in print and in, say, video, multi-modality, which online hybrid learning gives us really well, that tool. So it's sort of, at least in our school district, it's really this sort of loose, tight joining of there really is a curriculum, and we do have a curriculum map, but how you interpret it in your school and how your teachers in that grade level work it out might be slightly different from school to school and classroom to classroom.
Yeah, so my question is about beta testing, and 2 of the challenges that I've heard this morning about implementing blended learning are just, on the one hand, you have teachers who are reluctant to use this stuff. They don't trust that it's going to work, and they're afraid that it's going to just be a pain in their butts, and they're not really willing to put a whole lot of time and energy into figuring out how to use the product. And on the other hand, you have this set of tech products that is, Ray, like you were saying, not quite up to standard, not quite ready to use. And so how do you get these 2 groups of people to collaborate together to make products better? And Ray, you and I had a conversation yesterday about what could have been a great beta test where the manufacturer of the product really didn't follow through all that well. So that's kind of tragic. And I view you in your role as with Match Education as one of the people who can really move this conversation forward because of the experimentation you're doing. So my question for the panel is, how do we get more of this experimentation? How do we get like 10,000 Rays out there trying out these products, collaborating with the tech innovators so that we can improve these products and make them usable in the schools?
The first thing I want to say before I go to the panel is I think you went to the wrong session, because the ecosystem one is all about that, I think, and really talking about what's happening out there in terms of the people that are bringing the beta testers together with the schools. But so I would definitely, I would love to follow up with you afterward with a couple things. But what do you guys think? And I think you answered that a little bit. And Dan opened up his entire school and district to you, so you should go and talk to him. But were there other thoughts that you had around that?
10,000 rays sounds terrifying.
To all of us.
Especially, yes, yeah. No, I think there's often a gap between folks who are freed up and able to and interested in and effective at testing out products and learning that gap between the product itself and then all the ways to effectively and ineffectively implement it. And so having places where people are intentionally trying those things out versus a random smattering of teachers who in some for 20 minutes one day and 15 minutes and they've got 50 million things they're trying to do, it's not at the top of their list.
It's a challenge. I don't have a magic bullet.
And to go back to what Jean said earlier too, you know, like these are our students. You know, like it's hard for us to just throw kids into something where, you know, we clearly don't know if it's going to be beneficial or not. You know, but like beta testing, you know, I've been beta testing software for years on my own. But that's because, like, okay, you know, like I want to try out this new software. It's easy to make that decision for myself. It's hard to make that decision for the 300 students who are in my building, because we only get one shot at third grade with them.
Right.
So you know, I think what Ray was saying before is you probably would have to in a lot of cases really build up relationships with, in some cases, like individual teachers who, you know, it's like you have to make sure they understand like what are the real benefits that they could get out of it, but also, you know, you have to be completely upfront about what are the problems that they could face. You know, most teachers do not, you know, just like most computer users, don't want to beta test something. They want to get something that is already working. And you know, realistically, you're going to have a small number of users who are going to go through that beta process no matter what industry you're in, just because you want something that's working. When I was doing some, you know, online testing with my kids last week, and the servers went down because they didn't have enough capacity, that's a problem to me, and that wasn't even a piece of beta software.
And I just have one quick thing to add on that, and that's, so we have a teachers council that we kind of go and they're kind of our go-to folks for bouncing around ideas and kind of talking through what products we're going to be launching. But the one thing for other entrepreneurs and folks who are out there, who we definitely have to keep this always in the back of our heads, is our teacher council is not necessarily representative of teachers at large.
Yes,
and so we know that those are our power users, the folks that know our product inside out, already know how to use it. And so we also have relationships with district administrators who are power users, but who have teachers who are kind of varied levels who will roll out products with us. And so I think that's a huge one. You know, there will be those loud folks who love technology, and there'll be the loud folks who say no, no, no. But you have to kind of also, just like students, there's kind of that middle band that you also definitely have to be aware of too.
Another thing is that you have to weigh the benefit and the risks. If I've got a really intractable problem that I can't solve, and there's someone with a piece of software that they say they can solve this, then there might be a better chance for a beta testing. 20 years ago, I was a beta test district for Lexia Learning, and that was an amazing product, and it at the time was really different in schools because it self-adjusted to students' responses, and we worked hand in hand with the developers of that product for many years. But it was because we were having a really hard time getting special education students to read really well in elementary schools. So it addressed a problem we couldn't solve. So sometimes, depending on the height of the problem and how that applies to it, whether you can solve it other ways, there might be more tendency to take a risk.
So like if you have a new online math solution that you want us to beta test, we have a lot of online math solutions we can already choose from.
Right.
So you have to solve for some amazing new issue that we're having that that would make us willing to work with you and try it out.
And it sounds like you've kind of identified a pain point that exists in this space right now, and that might be where the next solution is how do you connect these two places together? I mean, I think that is its own pain point in itself.
I have a question about developing teacher leadership around integrating new technologies, because you've all alluded to the fact that you have some naysayers and then some really innovative teachers. How do you cultivate those innovative teachers so that they become very influential? And do you put them in leadership positions? Do you have brown bag lunches where teachers share, this is how I did it, if I can do it, you can easily do it too? I mean, what are some of your strategies so that innovation really takes hold in your schools and districts? Have you come up with effective strategies?
And this is going to be our last question, and we got to do it kind of quick. So if you guys have a quick strategy that you use for leadership building, let us have it.
Two quick little strategies. One is train the trainer. So I'm bringing out Atlas curriculum mapping and Edline. So I have an Atlas ambassador in every school, and I have an Edline expert in every school. So I give them extra training, and then they work with the teachers in their building. Another strategy that we've used very successfully is the snowball dance. If you're at a wedding and two people dance and then they each have to stop and get a partner, I start with 5 people and then I say, okay, now you all have to pick a partner and bring them along. Okay, now all 10 of you have to split up and you all have to get a partner and bring them along. And in 2 years, we went from nobody doing online grading at the high school to everybody doing online grading at the high school using the snowball dance.
No?
Just testing things out in the school, I think, like she said, and so we've tried a couple products, and then I'll have teachers who sort of see it through the window. What is it that you're doing there? Or writing up something that's sort of a case study within your own school. Teacher X did this. Here are the 50 little details on how they implemented it. Here's what they learned. If you want to try it out, talk to that person.
I think it's really, in a lot of cases, just encouraging teachers to share more and collaborate more,
Right.
which is difficult for teachers. In some cases because of school culture, in some cases because they don't have adequate time in order to be able to do it. But it was really heartening to me the other week when I was in a 3rd grade classroom working with some people, and a 5th grade teacher walked by, and the 2 teachers in the classroom talked for a few minutes about what one teacher was doing versus the other one was doing. It's like, we should share this at the next faculty meeting, and inside I'm going, yes, yes.
Excellent. Can we give a round of applause for our panel?